Fishwife.
What?
No, not for small. Fly.
The only real difference between him and Basil is that he was small and had a very large hen-pecking wife.
So I didn't have any problems with saying what I didn't think was funny. No, I don't believe that. Why does he say that?
What if one of the most iconic comedies in television history was inspired by a hotel stay so awkward it felt like a prank? Fawlty Towers delivered just 12 episodes, yet decades later it's still quoted, debated and adored. But behind the laughs lies a story full of chaos, controversy and unexpected drama. From the real-life disaster that sparked Basil Fawlty to the episode that nearly got the show pulled off air, this is the wild truth behind a sitcom that refused to play by the rules. What really happened at the hotel that changed British comedy forever?
No, look, now listen, I'm not going to do it this week. No, I'm sorry, no, the series ended last week. I know the contract said 6, but there was a strike and that wasn't my fault, was it? Well, you've got to have something. I mean, what about edited motocross highlights or Horse of the Year show or inter-counties basket weaving or something?
To understand that, we have to go back to where it all started, not in a writer's room or a studio, but at a seaside hotel in the town of Torquay in Devon, England. The year was 1970. The cast and crew of Monty Python's Flying Circus were in town filming, and they needed a place to stay. Naturally, they checked into a local hotel that, at first glance, seemed fairly standard, but the experience they had there would go on to shape one of the most iconic comedies in TV history. The hotel was called the Gleneagles, and it was run by a man named Donald Sinclair. Sinclair wasn't exactly what you'd call a welcoming host. In fact, many of the Monty Python team described him as actively hostile and extremely suspicious of his guests. John Cleese, one of the leading members of the Python group, found his behavior not just odd, but completely absurd. To Cleese, it was clear that Sinclair wasn't simply bad at customer service. He was so bad that it bordered on comedy. One of the most well-known stories from that visit involves Eric Idle, another member of the Monty Python crew. He left his briefcase in the hotel lobby. Instead of asking around to find out who it belonged to, Sinclair reportedly picked it up, assumed it was a bomb, and threw it over a wall into a neighboring property. This wasn't played for laughs. This was a sign that the man running this hotel might be in the wrong profession. There were other incidents too. According to Terry Gilliam, another Python, Sinclair once reprimanded him at dinner for using his knife and fork in the wrong hands, which the hotel owner considered improper. It didn't stop there. Sinclair was known to bark at guests, scold them for minor things, and act more like a strict schoolmaster than a hotel manager. It was clear to the Monty Python team that something wasn't right, but it was also incredibly funny, if you weren't the one being told off, of course. John Cleese, always someone with a sharp eye for character and situation, began taking mental notes. In Sinclair, he saw the foundation of a character that could carry a show. This wasn't just about one man being rude, it was about a personality type that exaggerated the worst parts of British manners and hospitality. It was the kind of character that could anchor a sitcom. And that's exactly what happened. Years later, Cleese, along with his then-wife Connie Booth, began developing a show based on their experience at the Gleneagles. The character at the centre of it would be a hotel owner, rude, uptight, socially awkward, and completely out of his depth. His name? Basil Fawlty. Although the character was fictional and exaggerated for comedic effect, many of Sinclair's real-life behaviours and mannerisms found their way into Basil's personality. According to Cleese, Sinclair never knew that he had been the inspiration for Basil. He passed away in 1981, not long after the show had wrapped its final episodes. Whether that was for the best is hard to say. Some accounts suggest that Sinclair's widow wasn't happy with the way he had been portrayed, but the show had already become a massive hit by then. Fawlty Towers aired its first episode in 1975, but the seeds of its creation had clearly been planted 5 years earlier, during that chaotic hotel stay in Torquay. The show was always intended to be more than just slapstick. It was written with precision and purpose, combining farcical situations with sharply drawn characters, and at the center of it all was Basil. Flawed, frustrated, and constantly failing at the one thing he was supposed to be doing, running a hotel. It's important to note that not everyone had the same reaction to Donald Sinclair. Some guests over the years defended him, saying he was simply a bit old-fashioned or misunderstood. But Cleese and his team experienced something different. To them, Sinclair was the perfect example of how customer service can go hilariously wrong when the person in charge has no business dealing with people. The Gleneagles Hotel itself became something of a footnote in comedy history. For many years it operated with a reputation for being the real-life Fawlty Towers. In 2015 the building was eventually demolished, but its connection to the sitcom remains a major part of its legacy. What makes this origin story so fascinating is how something so ordinary, a bad hotel experience, turned into something so enduring. It shows how observational comedy often comes from real life. Instead of inventing Basil from thin air, Cleese and Booth took inspiration from a real person and let their creativity do the rest. That approach gave Fawlty Towers a kind of authenticity that audiences immediately connected with. The idea of a man who desperately wants to be respected, yet continually makes things worse for himself, is both tragic and funny. That's what made Basil so relatable, even when he was being outrageous. And it all started with one very strange man running a very strange hotel in Torquay. It's also worth mentioning that while the original intention behind Fawlty Towers was comedy, the show also worked as a subtle critique of British class and social norms. Basil is obsessed with status. He wants to impress upper-class guests and appear more sophisticated than he really is. But his lack of social grace and quick temper always betray him. This dynamic added another layer to the show, one that likely wouldn't have existed without that early brush with Donald Sinclair. What's often forgotten is that Cleese didn't initially jump into making a sitcom after his stay at the Gleneagles Hotel. He continued working on other projects, including Monty Python's Flying Circus, before returning to the hotel idea a few years later. When he and Booth began writing the show, they wanted to capture more than just the absurdity of a rude hotel manager. They were aiming for something smarter, a comedy that worked on multiple levels. Their goal was to write something tight, fast-paced, and filled with situations that spiraled out of control in the most ridiculous ways possible. The result was Fawlty Towers, a show centered around a fictional seaside hotel in the town of Torquay, just like the one that inspired it. At the center of the show was Basil Fawlty, played by Cleese himself. Basil was uptight, constantly frustrated, and obsessed with status. He had dreams of running a high-class hotel, but his reality was anything but. Every effort he made to appear sophisticated only ended in disaster, whether he was trying to impress a guest, manage the staff, or simply keep the hotel running smoothly. Things always went spectacularly wrong. Booth not only co-wrote the series, she also played Polly, one of the hotel's employees. Polly was smart, calm under pressure, and often the only person keeping the place from falling apart completely. Her character worked as a perfect contrast to Basil's constant chaos. Then there was Sybil, Basil's wife, played by Prunella Scales. She was sharp, sarcastic, and had a commanding presence that often left Basil scrambling. And finally, there was Manuel, the well-meaning but often confused waiter from Barcelona, played by Andrew Sachs. His language barrier and misunderstandings added another layer of mayhem to each episode. When the show first aired on BBC Two in 1975, the reaction was mixed. Audiences were intrigued, but critics weren't immediately impressed. One famously called it a disaster, saying it tried too hard to be funny and came off as too chaotic. At the time, British sitcoms tended to follow a more traditional, predictable format. Fawlty Towers was different. Its pacing was fast, the characters were exaggerated, and the situations were more intense than what viewers were used to seeing. It didn't fit neatly into the box that many expected comedy to be in. But something interesting happened. While the critics debated its merits, the audience quietly started to love it. Viewers connected with the characters, especially Basil. He might have been a terrible hotel manager, but he was familiar. Most people had encountered someone like him before, someone who thought they were in control, but in reality were barely hanging on. His constant failures, his snobbish attitude, and his short temper made him both frustrating and entertaining to watch. The show's comedy came from far more than just slapstick moments or funny lines. It was deeply rooted in character dynamics. The relationship between Basil and Sybil was particularly sharp. While Sybil was often absent from the hotel's day-to-day problems, her sudden appearances and sharp-tongued remarks always put Basil back in his place. Polly, as the voice of reason, often stepped in to clean up the mess, while Manuel, through no fault of his own, usually made things worse. Each episode was structured like a farce. A small misunderstanding would quickly snowball into a much bigger problem, and Basil's attempts to fix it would only lead to more confusion. Whether he was dealing with unexpected guests, health inspectors, or faulty plumbing, things always spiraled out of his control. The humor was in the build-up, the slow and painful escalation of problems until everything finally exploded. Although only 6 episodes aired in the first season, the show quickly began to gain traction. Repeats helped, as more viewers started to discover the show through word of mouth. Unlike some shows that rely on catchphrases or recurring gags, Fawlty Towers felt fresh every week. The writing was tight, with no wasted dialogue, and the timing was near perfect. It became clear that Cleese and Booth had created something special, even if the early critics hadn't seen it right away. Despite the growing popularity, the BBC wasn't completely convinced at first. After the initial run of 6 episodes, there was a noticeable gap before the second season appeared. It took 4 years for the next batch of episodes to be produced and aired in 1979. The delay was due to a combination of factors, including Cleese and Booth's personal split. They had divorced in 1978, but remained committed to finishing the show. Their professionalism during that time is often praised, as they managed to put aside their differences to continue working together on a show they both cared deeply about. The second season included another 6 episodes, bringing the total to just 12. That small number often surprises people, especially those who assume the show must have gone on for years. But in that limited run, Fawlty Towers achieved something many shows with hundreds of episodes never do. It became timeless. The decision to end the show after only 2 seasons wasn't made by the BBC, but by Cleese and Booth. They believed they had told all the stories worth telling, and rather than drag the show out or repeat themselves, they chose to stop. That choice helped cement the show's reputation. It never had a chance to become stale or repetitive, and every episode remains sharp and memorable. Over the years, the reputation of Fawlty Towers only grew. It went from being a cult favourite to a recognised classic. In 2000, the British Film Institute ranked it the greatest British television programme of all time. By then, the critics who had once dismissed it had changed their tune, often citing the show as a masterclass in comedic writing and performance. What made the show so effective was its combination of farce, character comedy, and social commentary. Basil wasn't just a source of laughs, he was a symbol of something deeper. His obsession with status and his constant need to impress reflected broader themes in British society. He wanted to be seen as refined, successful, and respected, but he lacked the social skills and emotional intelligence to actually achieve those goals. That disconnect made him both tragic and hilarious. It's also worth noting the influence the show had on future generations of comedy writers and performers. Shows like The Office, Blackadder, and even Frasier have all acknowledged Fawlty Towers as an inspiration. Its influence can be seen in the way characters are developed, how scenes build toward chaos, and how tension is used as a tool for humor. In just 2 short seasons, Fawlty Towers managed to change the landscape of British comedy. It showed that sitcoms didn't have to follow a formula. They could be unpredictable, smart, and still wildly funny. And perhaps most importantly, it proved that great writing and performance don't need a large episode count to make a lasting impact. One episode in particular, The Germans, stands out as a flashpoint in the show's history. For many fans, it's one of the funniest and most memorable episodes ever made. For others, it became a symbol of how comedy can walk a very fine line between satire and offence. The story begins with Basil Fawlty suffering a concussion. In typical fashion, instead of resting or seeking proper help, he insists on continuing to run the hotel. His behaviour becomes even more erratic than usual. When a group of German guests checks in, Basil does his best to be diplomatic, but in his own uniquely disastrous way. He instructs the staff repeatedly not to mention the war, only to immediately bring it up himself in the most awkward and inappropriate ways. What follows is a sequence of escalating social faux pas, ending with Basil goose-stepping across the lobby in a surreal parody of Adolf Hitler. The scene was intended to highlight Basil's ignorance, not promote it. The humour comes from the discomfort and absurdity of the situation. The writers were clearly mocking outdated British attitudes, not endorsing them. Yet despite the intent, the response to the episode was mixed. When the episode aired in 1975, most British audiences found it hilarious. The absurdity of Basil's behaviour, especially in front of the German guests, struck a chord. Many viewers understood that the joke was on Basil himself. He was the fool, not the guests. However, some found it insensitive. In particular, viewers with personal or family connections to the war took issue with the comedic portrayal of such a painful topic. In Germany, the reaction was also mixed. Some German viewers appreciated the satire and recognised it as a critique of post-war British attitudes. Others felt it was in poor taste. As the years went on and attitudes towards television content evolved, the Germans episode remained controversial. While it was never formally banned, there were periods when it was pulled from reruns or streaming services, especially during times of increased sensitivity to historical subjects. In more recent years, debates about political correctness and cultural sensitivity brought the episode back into the spotlight. Some broadcasters edited out specific scenes or added disclaimers, while others chose not to air the episode at all. These decisions sparked a wave of backlash from fans who believed the show should be viewed in its original context. John Cleese, who played Basil and co-wrote the show, has been vocal in defending the episode. He argues that the scene was never meant to make fun of German people, but rather to mock Basil's incompetence and outdated views. Cleese has said that the humour lies in watching a man try and fail spectacularly to behave appropriately, only to embarrass himself at every turn. To him, removing or censoring the episode misses the point entirely. But The Germans wasn't the only aspect of Fawlty Towers that has faced scrutiny over the years. The character of Manuel, the Spanish waiter played by Andrew Sachs, has also been the subject of debate. Manuel is portrayed as well-meaning but clueless. He struggles with the English language and frequently misunderstands instructions, often with chaotic results. At the time the show aired, Manuel was seen as a source of light-hearted humour. His catchphrases such as "Key" and "I know nothing" became widely quoted by fans. Many viewers found him endearing, and his interactions with Basil were some of the most memorable in the series. However, as public conversations about representation and stereotypes evolved, questions began to surface about whether the character reinforced negative ideas about immigrants and people with language barriers. Some critics have argued that Manuel's portrayal leaned too heavily into cliché. His broken English and bumbling nature, they suggest, may have unintentionally played into outdated stereotypes. On the other hand, many defend the character as innocent and sweet, pointing out that he was never the target of cruelty in the writing, only the chaos around him. Importantly, the joke was almost always on Basil, who lost his temper because of his own inability to communicate effectively. Andrew Sachs himself, who was born in Germany and moved to the UK as a child, never publicly expressed discomfort with the role. In interviews, he said he enjoyed playing Manuel and understood that the character was written with affection. He embraced the physical comedy and brought a lot of charm to the role, which helped make Manuel one of the show's most beloved characters. The conversations around Fawlty Towers reflect a broader discussion happening across media and entertainment. As older shows continue to find new audiences through streaming platforms, viewers and content providers are re-evaluating material through a modern lens. This often leads to questions about what should be preserved, what should be edited, and whether historical content should excuse certain content. Some networks have chosen to include warnings before episodes, explaining that certain scenes reflect the attitudes of the time and may be considered offensive today. Others have decided not to air controversial episodes altogether. These decisions are rarely simple. They often involve balancing artistic intent with public perception, and not everyone agrees on where that line should be drawn. Fans of Fawlty Towers tend to be passionate about preserving the show in its original form. Many argue that the humour still holds up, especially when viewed with an understanding of the time in which it was made. They point out that the show was never mean-spirited and that its characters were often exaggerated to the point of caricature, making it clear that the jokes weren't meant to reflect real views. John Cleese has remained a prominent voice in these discussions. Over the years, he's spoken out against what he sees as unnecessary censorship and the stifling of creative expression. He stated that comedy should challenge people and that audiences are capable of recognizing satire when they see it. Cleese's stance is that Fawlty Towers was always punching up, never down, and that Basil Fawlty's ignorance was the true subject of mockery. Regardless of where people stand on these issues, one thing is certain: Fawlty Towers sparked conversations that go far beyond comedy. It became more than just a sitcom. It became a reflection of social attitudes, a source of debate, and a case study in how comedy evolves over time. Few shows have managed to generate such lasting impact from such a small number of episodes. Even now, nearly 50 years after it first aired, Fawlty Towers continues to be quoted, referenced, and discussed. Its cultural footprint is enormous, not only in the UK but around the world. And part of that legacy includes the conversations it continues to spark about taste, timing, context, and comedy. John Cleese, who co-wrote the show and played the permanently stressed Basil Fawlty, was already a household name thanks to his work with Monty Python. But Fawlty Towers allowed him to explore a different kind of comedy, more structured, more character-driven, and at times even darker. His portrayal of Basil was so specific, so detailed, that it became instantly iconic. Every twitch, every sarcastic remark, every frustrated breakdown was rooted in Cleese's deep understanding of how people behave under pressure. Basil wasn't just a caricature, he was a man completely overwhelmed by his own ambitions and deeply insecure about the world around him. But Cleese didn't create the show alone. His then-wife, Connie Booth, was just as involved in crafting the world of Fawlty Towers. She co-wrote every episode with him and also played Polly, the level-headed hotel assistant who often had to clean up the mess Basil left behind. Booth's performance brought warmth and intelligence to the show, and her writing helped shape its unique tone. While the two eventually divorced in 1978, they continued working together to complete the second season, which aired a year later. It was a rare example of two people putting their differences aside for the sake of the project. Despite their separation, there was no public feud, no scandal, and no signs of tension on screen. If anything, their shared professionalism only added to the show's success. Cleese has often said that Booth was instrumental in shaping the show's style, and many fans agree that her influence is part of what made it so memorable. Prunella Scales, who played Basil's sharp-tongued wife Sybil, was another key figure in the show's success. In real life, she was far from the bossy, domineering woman she played on screen. Colleagues often described her as warm, thoughtful, and easy to work with. Scales brought a perfect balance to Sybil, just enough bite to keep Basil in check, but always grounded in realism. She once mentioned in interviews that she based Sybil on women she'd met in real life. People who seemed to run entire worlds with nothing but a clipboard and a determined attitude. Andrew Sachs, who portrayed Manuel, might have had the toughest job of all. His role required a lot of physical comedy, including falls, burns, and the occasional slap with the frying pan. In fact, during one early scene, Sachs was accidentally hit on the head with a real metal pan. It left him with a bruise, and after that, the props team quickly swapped it out for a rubber version. Sachs was also burned during a kitchen fire scene, yet he continued performing without complaint. He fully understood that Manuel, though often the butt of the joke, was never portrayed with malice. His character had heart, and Sachs gave him a sense of humanity that audiences loved. Beyond the main cast, the supporting actors also left a lasting impression. Ballard Barkley played the slightly senile Major Gowan, delivering lines that would never pass in today's scripts, but which perfectly captured the outdated attitudes of an older generation. Barkley, a seasoned actor whose career dated back to the 1920s, passed away in 1988. His portrayal of the Major remains a reminder of how well drawn even the secondary characters were in the show. Brian Hall, who played the hotel chef Terry, appeared in the second season. He wasn't featured in every episode, but his presence added another layer of energy and unpredictability to the hotel staff. After the show, Hall continued working in film and television, but passed away in 1997. His contributions, like those of the others, helped round out the world of Fawlty Towers and made it feel like a real, if dysfunctional, workplace. Then there were Gillyflower and Renee Roberts, who played Miss Tibbs and Miss Gatsby, the elderly guests who adored Basil and often served as a comedic chorus to the main action. Though their roles were small, they made a significant impact, showing just how much detail the show paid to even the smallest interactions. As time passed, the show's legacy only grew stronger. Reruns continued to attract new generations of fans. In 2000, the British Film Institute ranked Fawlty Towers as the greatest British television programme of all time. The show, despite having just 12 episodes, was now considered part of British cultural history. But what happened to the cast after the final episode aired? John Cleese went on to have a hugely successful career in film and television. In 1988, he co-wrote and starred in A Fish Called Wanda, which became an international hit. He also appeared in major films like Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and voiced characters in animated films such as Shrek 2 and The Jungle Book. Known for his outspoken views, Cleese has remained active in public life and continues to be a vocal critic of censorship and political correctness in comedy. Bonnie Booth, on the other hand, took a very different path. After Fawlty Towers, she gradually stepped away from acting and later trained as a psychotherapist. She chose to live a private life and has rarely appeared in public or given interviews about the show. Her decision to step away from the spotlight surprised many, but she has consistently expressed her desire to focus on work that felt personally meaningful. Prunella Scales continued acting for many years, appearing in both film and television, including roles in Howard's End and the long-running show Mapp and Lucia. In later years, she was diagnosed with vascular dementia. Her husband, actor Timothy West, has spoken openly about her condition and the challenges it has brought. Despite her illness, Scales remains admired for her long and respected career. Andrew Sachs also continued acting well into his later years. He appeared in shows like Coronation Street and even had a guest role in Doctor Who. Sachs passed away in 2016 at the age of 86 after a long battle with dementia. His portrayal of Manuel is still remembered as one of the most iconic and beloved characters in British sitcom history. With the passing years, the idea of a reboot or revival of Fawlty Towers always seemed unlikely. Cleese himself had said many times that the show was best left as it was, short, sharp and untouched. But in 2023, he surprised fans by announcing a new project, a continuation of Fawlty Towers featuring his real-life daughter, Camilla Cleese. The new version is set in a modern setting and will explore Basil's life in a different era, with Camilla playing his daughter. Reactions to the news were mixed. Some fans are excited to see Basil return, curious about how the character will adapt to today's world. Others are more cautious, wondering if the tone and style of the original can work in a more sensitive, politically aware era. Cleese has addressed these concerns, stating that the new version will remain true to the core of the original while acknowledging the world has changed. Whatever the outcome, one thing is certain: the original Fawlty Towers remains a unique achievement in television history. Its blend of sharp writing, unforgettable characters, and relentless pacing still sets it apart. The show managed to pack more energy, humor, and tension into half-hour episodes than most series achieve in entire seasons. Behind all the laughs, it was a show built on hard work, risk-taking, and personal sacrifice. And while the cast has moved on, some still with us, others sadly gone, their work continues to live on, endlessly quoted, analysed, and loved. The chaos of Fawlty Towers might have been fictional, but the impact it left is very real.